The world is crazy, and it's not your fault. Time. Doesn't it seem like there is never enough time to get everything you need done? And there are so many ways in which we can get caught into a trap, a vortex that just sucks all the time away. Technology. Remember when they used to talk about technology as being a time saver? Now it's a time sink. For example, Facebook. It takes a lot of time to stay up to date with your friends. Communication. Remember when there just used to be one telephone? Now it takes like 4 or 5 different methods to make sure that you get your message across to who you need to speak to. The telephone, texting, emailing, instant messaging. Oh, and that doesn't account for video conferencing and Zoom and Skype and the rest of them. And how do you even keep track of who uses what? I often use all 4 just to cover all the bases. And that's time consuming, isn't it? And then, in addition to that, there's family issues, there's politics, there's crises, there are interruptions, and they all take away time. And then there's the new technology on the computer. You think you've got it all figured out, and then you get on and they've changed it again. Doesn't it drive you crazy? Actually, the real time traps are not the technology, are not the clocks, but really our response and our behavior and the way in which we see and perceive and operate in time. Time actually doesn't exist. We as a society have created these mechanisms for keeping track of time. And then we force ourselves into those tiny little increments, and they're not natural. I'm going to talk to you about the 4 P's, which are patterns or habits that make it more difficult for us to get the work or take the action we want done. And they are pushing, perfecting, procrastinating, and pleasing. And I'm going to explain to you how they operate in the 3 areas of the pillars of a good life, and that is wealth, health, and love. How do those 4 time bandits undermine you? So let's look at work first. Pushing. It's really hard to resist that. You're working on your blog, or you're writing a piece of ad copy, or you're trying to get a project done. Hi there, welcome. I'm talking about time traps. And you want to get it done. And so you keep on pushing and you push and you push because you want to get it finished before you go to bed. And pretty soon the whole day is gone. And you say to yourself, well, that didn't work very well because first of all, I made a ton of mistakes. I have to go back tomorrow again and go over it again. And also there's a part of you that when you push, that inner child, she doesn't want to do it again. She's like, no, please, no more. So pushing is not a really good way of dealing with things. And yet we develop that pattern of pushing. And I'm going to explain why. So number 2 is perfection. We want to get it right. You're working on your blog, and you stay there because I want it to be so smooth that when you read it, it just flows perfectly. And what happens? You don't get it done. It gets out too late. It doesn't have the impact it should have. Perfectionism can really hold you back from taking action. Number 3 is procrastination. And this is different from perfection in that you don't even get started. And sometimes you procrastinate on the most important things because you feel like, oh my God, they're going to take so much time. So, for example, you don't go and edit that video because what program are you going to use? And do you know how to use it? And it's going to take all that time to figure out how to use that program to get it. And so you just procrastinate. And you work on the simple things that you know you're going to get done. So all the little quick things you get done, but meanwhile, the big projects never get started. And those are usually the important ones, aren't they? And finally, pleasing. Pleasing is when you allow other people to interrupt you in the middle of things. A couple of times I have turned off my telephone because it has rung in the middle of a group call or a presentation. So I turned it off, and then I forget to turn it back on because you can only turn it back on when somebody is calling you. And I'll go for days and I'll say, oh my God, I'm getting so much done because I don't answer the phone. So that's one example, is pleasing. But sometimes it's pleasing yourself too, because you want to procrastinate. And so you take those phone calls when you really need to set aside time for your phone calls, set aside time for your emails. But that want to be pleasing, to respond right away, to get it off your desk. And pretty soon all you've ever gotten done is answering your emails or answering the phone. And then the other way in which pleasing comes in is a family member or your spouse needs help and you're just out of the seat and you're off to do that. So you can see how the 4 P's kind of work together: the perfection and the pushing and the avoiding, which is procrastination, is that you run away. So how do these 4 P's work in terms of health? Well, if you push yourself too much, you take, and with pleasing, you take on too many tasks, and you keep on pushing to get it all done, you can end up sick. A colleague of mine, she just took on too many things, and she ended up not being able to show up at an event. This happens all the time. You put too many things on your agenda, and then you try and do them all, and then you get sick. Pushing is not good for the body. You need to take breaks. You need to take time off. Ask yourself today, how many breaks have you taken today? Have you taken any time off? Have you gotten up out of your chair and gone outside? And of course, I know it's hot today, at least here in California, and just stood in a garden or looked at a tree or watched a bird. Probably not. I don't think I have done that yet today. So that affects your well-being and your health. So what about perfection? Well, perfection is the same kind of thing, is that when you fail to be perfect, it actually causes anxiety and stress. And of course, anxiety and stress cause inflammation in the body. It makes you sick. Even if you don't get sick right away, over time, it causes aging, both of them, pushing and perfection. And how does procrastination cause illness? Well, procrastination causes illness because of the stress you feel from not getting the work done that you need to get done. It kind of hangs over you, and there's this naggy voice in you that's telling you that you're failing, that you're not good enough, and also you're not getting the success you want. And so that leads sometimes to ill health. And sometimes you have ill health because you're tired of pushing and your body says, enough, and you get sick so that you can take time out. And how does pleasing work into affecting your health? Again, you say yes too many times. And sometimes the only good excuse is to get sick. And if you're a really honest person like me, you have to actually get sick to do that. Although I have gotten better at telling people, I just can't do this. Because I start to see how pushing and taking on too much actually affects the quality of my work. So perfection sometimes works against pushing. All right, so what about love? How do these three P's work when it comes to love? Well, pushing. You may be pushing your relationship too fast, or you may be pushing your spouse when you need to just let him go at his own pace, or you may be pushing yourself to do things that satisfy your lover that you don't really want to do. And any of these things can get in the way of positive outcomes. You irritate your partner or your lover because you're pushing them too hard, or you're pushing yourself too hard, and then you feel irritated and resentful, and that causes arguments. Okay, so what about perfection? Well, perfection shows up. You're trying to be perfect. You don't want to really show your shadow side. And eventually, she pops up. She shows up. Or you spend a lot of time fixing yourself up, and then maybe you don't get the approval or the appreciation that you expected. And that really makes you angry too, doesn't it? Sometimes perfection prevents you from communicating because you want to express yourself, but you want to get it just right. And so you don't communicate at all. So perfection gets in the way when you want to communicate something and you want to get it exactly right. Sometimes it's better to just do it. Procrastination is a little bit like perfection in this case. You keep on waiting. You wait for things to get better. You wait for things to clarify. You wait for your lover to take initiative. You are afraid of taking action because you're worried about the consequences. I'm going to talk a little bit about fear in a minute, so this is a little foreshadowing. And finally, pleasing. So I really understand this pattern. I grew up as a people pleaser. It is a trap. When you please others and you don't please yourself, you set yourself up for resentment. You need to come first. You need to take care of yourself. You need to fill yourself up before you can help somebody else or please somebody else. You need to please yourself. So where do these patterns come from? Early childhood training, learning, patterning. As children, we are sponges. We learn from our parents how to behave. Plus, as children, especially young children, we are dependent on our parents for our survival. And so, of course, we want to please them. First of all, we love them because they are the sun and moon. But also, if the love is not unconditional, is not forthcoming, we learn to manipulate our world so that we get what we need. So let's look at how the pushing, perfecting, procrastinating, and pleasing comes out of that. Well, it comes out of fear of the consequences. So pushing often comes from being afraid of feeling your feelings. A lot of people out in the world today are running a mile a minute. And as long as they're running, they don't have to feel what's going on underneath. And so that becomes a pattern. And there's also a certain soothingness about being busy all the time. Not to mention, our culture really supports busyness. And you are affirmed by being busy all the time. Oh my gosh, I have a client who has trashed her health by pushing so hard and trying to be perfect. And those two things are really killing her health. What she should be doing is stop procrastinating and leave that job that is not working for her. I mean, the only thing that's going for her is it makes good money. It isn't filling her up, inspiring her. When we are doing things that we love, it actually can it can provide us with the energy that we need to work long hours, but not exhaust us. So back to the underlying patterns. So there's pushing, which you can get in the habit of because you don't want to feel your feelings and because you don't want to be criticized, and you feel that as long as you're pushing, that you will be seen as an industrious worker or that you are effective. Now, I don't know that pushing is perceived that way in relationships. However, the habit can get in the way. And also, if you're pushing yourself hard in work, you might not have time for your relationship. And that's another way in which it hurts your relationship. Perfection. We develop the pattern of perfection when we feel that we are not good enough, when we feel that we have to prove our value by getting it right. Maybe you had a kind of little bit wacky mother like I did, who was impossible to please. An impossible to please parent really sets you up for perfection. You try and figure out what is the one way to get it right so that they don't give you grief, so that you don't get criticized, so that you don't get shamed, so that you don't fail. And that's what sets you up for perfection. And then there is procrastination. I see procrastination as a way of hiding, of avoiding. It's an avoidance response. You hide away, you escape so that you don't have to deal with it because you don't want to fail and you're afraid that you're going to fail, so you procrastinate. Totally understandable. You're trying to fit all this stuff into your time, and so you fit the easy stuff in because you know you can get that right, and then the big stuff doesn't ever get addressed. And so in the end, you actually end up failing anyway. Or you procrastinate because literally you have too many things to do. And so you, of course, leave the most difficult or the less urgent because it's not today, but meanwhile, you needed to work on that earlier. And then finally, pleasing. You put, that certainly comes from the not feeling worthy or worthwhile or good enough. You want to please your parents and then eventually the rest of the world so that you don't get grief, so that you get rewards, so you get approval. And the pleasing is what leads you to take on a lot of extra activities that lead you to pushing, lead you to ill health, lead you to not paying attention to what you need to do in your relationship. So it's kind of like a merry-go-round, isn't it? Only it's not so merry. It's sort of like one of those hamster wheels where you're running and running and running all the time. So what can you do? You have to change your patterns. You have to change the way in which you perceive time. If you would like to know more about that, schedule an introductory 15-20-minute conversation with me, and I can explain to you how I can help you work on those early childhood patterns that set you up to be on the hamster wheel, that set you up to fall into the traps of the 4 Ps of perfecting, pushing, pleasing, procrastinating. The link is over in the comments section. If this resonates with you and you are tired of pushing yourself, worried about your health, not getting the results that you want in your work, or you aren't having the results that you want in your relationship, let's have a conversation. That's all for today. Hope you enjoyed this, and be brilliant. Bye for now.